Good morning, everyone. I am Rosemary Kayari. I, together with my groupmates, will discuss about the Asian regionalism and discussing how security challenges, ecological breakdown, demands for human trafficking are just among the issues faced by Asia-Pacific region's phenomena that demand multilateral response. Alright, we have here our lesson map. It shows that regionalism is apparently another response to the ever-growing needs and complexities of globalization, especially in Asia. Amidst globalization, another phenomenon is becoming more apparent. We have regionalism. Tanaka and Inoguchi in 1996 is a compilation of papers presented at United Nations University, articulated at the post-Cold War era, is characterized by unique dynamics in international relations. First, resolving regional conflicts. Countries tend to rely on global fora such as United Nations, thus paving way for the emergence of peacekeeping initiatives and regional trade organizations. In general, nations nowadays are more agreeable, at least as indicated by less profound armed conflicts and wars among nations. Conflicts are, however, present in other spheres, such as, for instance, territorial disputes, which have implication on assertion of political powers in a given region, or which will provide competitive advantage in economic opportunities. In the earlier years of human history, misunderstandings or conflict of interest could have been resolved outright by bloody and massive wars. But now, nations are utilizing their diplomatic prowess to mitigate the possibility of catastrophic ends. Second one is the emergence of regional cooperation among countries to achieve political and economic goals. According to Hernandez on 1996, even suggested that such flexibility and fluidity in regionalism is consequential to the end of the Cold War. As we can see nowadays, countries are becoming more open to collaborate with other countries in terms of economic development in particular and human development in general. Another trend is nations' commitment to their cultural identities. According to Huntington on 1996, one of the consequences of the post-Cold War affairs is the shift of power from West to groups of nations with similar cultural identity. Huntington referred to these nations as civilizations. Civilizations, a proposition foundational to his clash of civilization hypothesis. Apparently, nations are becoming more committed to other nations which cultural identity they share. Edris M. or Edris Muhammad in 2017 in an article on the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation or SAARC noted that regionalism may be a manifestation for a space for regional arrangement amidst an overburdened world system. Andres M. continued by pointing out that after the Second World War, global trends have emerged which show why regionalism is a necessary phenomenon. We have first, amidst globalization, global problems remain to be tackled in regional spheres. We have second, the collapse of the alliances has led to regionalism and trans-regionalism trends. Third, regionalism is an attempt for resilience in a world which remains to acknowledge superpower tendencies among particular states such as America. Fourth and lastly, growing insecurity within particular regions require solutions from within these regions, something which is made complicated by global dynamics. In these articulations, we can see that regionalism is apparently another response to the ever growing needs and complexities of globalization. That's all for my part. Thank you for listening.
Good day, everyone. Again, my name is Kate Glyza Arcasuela, reporter number 2, which is the topic of Witnesses Phases of Regionalism and Degrees of Regionness. But before we start, let's find out what regionalism and regionness is. Okay, so regionalism is an expression of a common sense of identity, and it is an implementations that express a particular identity, and also it shapes collective action within geographical region. And regionalism, it is described as actions by governments by liberalize or facilitate trade on a regional basis. And regionness is a political and social project devised by human actors in order to protect or transform existing structures. Okay? And now, let's proceed to the next slide. So, who is Hetny? The full name of Hetny is Björn Hetny. He is a professor emeritus at economic history at Göteborg University. He has written extensively on international political economic regionalism and South Asia Europe and development and conflict theory. And Hitney 1996 argued that regionalism has two phases, the old and the new. So here's the following table summarizes Hitney's articulation. So mauni ang two phases sa regionalism, which is the old regionalism and new regionalism. So old regionalism has its roots in devastating experience of interwar nationalism and World War II. It is therefore closely linked to the discussions about regional integrations in Europe, and in particular to the formation of the European communities. Okay, so diri sad sa kaning new regionalism, it following the Cold War. Okay, there was a shift in national administrative system as well as sa cultural, economic, and political organization. Okay, now basaw na nako ang mga nakasuyat sa old regionalism. So, bipolar such that it was reduced in schemes between opposing political alliances. Okay, so bipolarity is a power distribution in which two states have a majority of the power. And around each pole of bipolarity, areas of influence and alliance structures have frequently emerged. And next is imposed by the superpowers and secures economic security within alliances and specific to economic and political objectives. And lastly is focus only on nation states. Okay, so sa new regionalism, multipolar as it is open for multilateral engagement and collaborations among countries, and also spontaneous and sought voluntary by constituent, and also open in as much as it is multipolar and comprehensive and multidimensional and involves non-state actors. Furthermore, Hetny suggested that regionness as a concept has varying degrees. So, region as a geographical unit, a region can be construed as a place, as a physical environment. So, for example, we can determine Asia as a region based on the land and water boundaries surround it. Okay, sa example, ang Europe from the Atlantic to the Urals, or ang Africa south of the Sahara, or the Indian subcontinent are examples of regions bounded by more or less natural physical barriers and marked by ecological characteristics. because of the fact that there is no organized society at this level. Um, it is referred to as a proto-region or pre-regional zone. To further regionalize, this particular place must be occupied by humans in order to can establish some sort of relationship. And this takes us to the social aspect of the situation. Okay, so mautong sa region as a geographical unit. Now let's proceed to region as a social system. A region can be construed as a conglomerate of people occupying a particular space and possessing unique dynamics of interaction. For instance, we can determine Asia as a region based on the group of people occupying it and the shared ancestry, language, and culture these people have. The concept of region as a social system implies the existence of translocal relationship between the human groups, okay? These relationships form a security complex in which the constituent units rely on one another for their own security as well as the overall stability of the regional system. Okay, so now let's proceed to region as an organized cooperation. So, a region can be construed as a group of nations who agree to take part and form a formal organization. For instance, Southeast Asia is a region within Asia, and it has been formalized through membership in the associations of Southeast Asian nations or ASEAN. Region is defined as organized cooperation in any of the cultural, economic, political, or military fields. In this case, the region is defined by the list of countries that are formal members of the regional organization in question. The concept of regionalism makes little sense in the absence of some kind of organized cooperation. And now let's proceed to region as civil society. A region can be construed as a network of cultural and social linkages among countries who voluntarily take part in a cooperation among nations. A region as civil society emerges when the organizational frameworks facilitates and promotes social communication and value convergence across the region. And of course, the existence of a shared culture tradition in a specific region is critical, but culture is not only a given, but is constantly created and recreated. And now let's proceed to a region as an acting subject. A region can be construed as a group of nations concerned about peace, welfare, and prosperity of its people. Okay, so region as acting subject with distinct identity, actor, capability, legitimacy, and decision making, structure, conflict resolution. And also, welfare creation are critical areas for regional intervention in terms of social security and regional balance. So that's all for my part. Thank you for listening. I hope nga naamoy nasabtan. Thank you and God bless.
Today, the world is incredibly, and now we will tackle about globalization versus regionalism. I am Melfred Cruzado, the reporter for today. What is regionalization? The process of closer economic integrations of country within the regions that divide it into called segment. It is the tendency to form the centrally effect of regionalization. First, provincial improvement, growth of domestic product, organized trading system. Opportunities. Number 1, MSME flourished. Number 2, increase in profit. Number 3, preventions of cultures and traditions. And the last, number 4, demand of high quality life. And now we will tackle about globalizations. So what is globalizations? Globalizations changes the way of nations, business and people interact. Specifically, it is changed the natures of economic activities among the nations, expanding trade, opening global supplies chain and providing access nations resources and labor's market. Also, refers to those processes by which people of the world's areas incorporated into single world societies and global society. Effect of globalization. Number one is access to new cultures. Number two, the spread of technologies and innovations. Number three is the lower cost of product. And number four, the high standards of living across the globe. As you can see, there is a diagram that defines the differences of globalizations and regionalizations. So globalization, it is a global interactions of international trade of investment, technologies, and cultures. More promotions of cultures, foreign direct investment, and the regionalizations, it is a regional interactions of countries. There is divided areas called segments. Less promotions of cultures and promote the domestic product. And the similarities of globalizations and regionalizations, it is both aims for economic growth and movement of economic integrations. There are few factors of contributing to the growth of Asia's intra-regional strength. They include the rise of regional income, the removal trade of barriers and advantages in product and transportation technology. There are two approaches that can be used to construct the common factors required the analysis. One approach is to assume that common factors driving trade integrations is presented by a set of observed economic variables or by the common elements of these economic variables. The choice of these economic variables is usually guided by some theoretical considerations. The second approach is to assume that the common factors is unobservables. We can extract that talent common factors directly from, say, some measures of bilateral trade integrations.
Hello everyone. So for our next discussion is all about the Asian regionalism. But before that, let us find out what is regionalism means. So regionalism described as action by government to liberalize or facilitate trade on a regional basis. It is a strengthened collective identity in a conglomerate of nations occupying a particular geographic area or aiming at shared goals. Increase in economic exchanges in particular area. So when we say conglomerate, it is a number of different things or parts that are put or grouped together to form a whole, but remain its distinct entities. Like for example, the world is divided according on the land and water boundaries surrounding it. Now that is why our world has a different continents, which is the Asia, South America, North America, Europe, Africa, and Australia. So kani sila, though gibahin-bahin into their geographic area and composed of different coastal regions and countries, naa sila'y kaugalingong distinct entities, meaning naa sila'y independent existence. But they share goals together in terms of increasing the economic exchanges in particular area. So since there are many regions in the world where regionalism can be observed, Asia is among this region where regional cooperation are emergent and becoming more influential. So according to Hernandez, 1996, mentioned specific trends which probably necessitate regional cooperation in the Asia-Pacific regions. The security challenges, ecological breakdown, demands for human resources, labor migration, international terrorism, epidemics, and drug trafficking are just among the issues faced in this part of world phenomena. So ang buot ipasabot ni Hernandez, among all of those issues that are mentioned are demands a multilateral responses, and a regional cooperation. So, here are some information about these distinct coastal regions. So, since Asia is the largest and most populated continent in the world and comprised of distinct regions such as Central Asia, East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. So, in this graph, on the first column is the coastal regions of the continent in Asia. And the second column is the some countries of coastal regions in the continent of Asia. And the third column is the overview or the informations from distinct regions of Asia. So in the Central Asia, the important in the Silk Road trade, historical, economic, and cultural exchange between Rome and China. The East Asia, cradle of ancient civilization such as the Chinese and Japanese civilization as well as the Mongol Empire. The South Asia, high population density and cradle of the Indian civilization. And in the Southeast Asia, found in Asia-Pacific Ring of Fire. Historically, the goal destination of European expedition for the spices. And in the Western Asia, or the known as Middle East, is the many arid desert regions but serve as gateways and routes for major bodies of water in the world. So, among this information, it is clearly stated that they have their own civilization, from historical to cultural to the population and economics. So, since Asia has become the cradle of several ancient civilizations, it has been also the home of influential cultural, philosophical, and religious movements where Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, Taoism, and other religions has generally originated from an Asian country and have been proliferated around the world. So, it is true that those religious or religion that are mentioned earlier is originally originated from the Asian country that have been adopted by many people or that have been proliferated around the world. So I think I am done. That's all, and thank you for listening about this discussion.
Good day, everyone. I hope you're doing great at the comfort of your home. By the way, I am Michi Binigay, and for today's discussion, I will be tackling about the dynamics of Asian regionalism. So what comes in your mind when you hear the word dynamics? If we say dynamics, it is the forces or properties which stimulate growth, development, or change within a system or process, or the dynamics of changing social relations. So now, let's start. Asia learned the hard way in 1998. The absence of regional cooperation can cause an economic misfortune, as said by Mulyani Indrawati, the Minister of Finance, Republic of Indonesia. We now understand how enhancing regional integration and cooperation is important to build a stronger and more resilient economies. So Mulyani Indrawati published a book, Emerging Asian Regionalism, a partnership for shared responsibility. Emerging Asian Regionalism offers a new platform for economic development that is good for individual economies, good for Asia, and good for the world. It is a partnership for shared prosperity. prosperity. In 2008, the Asian Development Bank published a book on the emerging regionalism in Asia. Haruhiko Kuroda, the president of ADB, in the foreword of this manuscript, he articulated that integration is contributory to the economic development experienced by Asian countries. This excellent study summarizes well the important issues related to Asian regionalism. It is a book everybody will enjoy reading, from policymakers to business leaders, scholars, and anyone interested to understand the dynamics of Asian economic interdependence. Kuroda identified some factors which are influential in the growing integration at the time. First is enhanced dialogue between citizens of various nations. This is facilitated by growing tourism activities in the regions and the consistent multilateral meetings among leaders of nation-states. Second is expanding intra-regional trade and investment. This brings forth closer financial markets and interdependent economies. And third, increased connectivity. This is facilitated by regional infrastructure projects as well as collaboration in delivering public goods. Furthermore, Kuroda noted that the market-friendly, multi-track, and multi-speed approach of the Asian integration is beneficial for the Asian region because of the following reasons. Members can integrate based on their capacity vis-a-vis the available opportunities. It opens up for collaboration and merging of smaller groups. It is responsive to business and open markets. There are various benefits perceived from the Asian integration. Some of those discussed by ADB in 2008 are as follows. It harnesses the strengths of diverse economies. It provides platform for connecting financial markets or reduce capital shared risk. It makes the economy more resilient to global risks. It pools resources and it creates regional mechanisms for safety and security. However, there are also challenges by ADB. These are the need to establish compatible product standards, the need to establish guidelines that buffer financial contagion and ensure compatible financial regulations, the need to coordinate macroeconomic policies, and the need to manage cross-border environmental and social policies, for example, fair treatment or migrant workers. Amitav Acharya, a professor of international relations, pointed out several criticisms that people who are skeptical to Asian regional institutions have. Skeptics think that these institutions have neither truly contributed in resolving conflicts and disputes. For example, People's Republic of China to Taiwan, Sukor or Nokor, and India to Pakistan conflicts, nor have used available mechanisms to resolve conflict, instead relying on International Court of Justice. Likewise, skeptics observe that these institutions have failed to successfully establish trust building within the region, manifested in arms acquisition and increasing naval operations. Furthermore, there are no humanitarian mechanisms despite the fact the region is relatively at risk to calamity. Amidst challenges and criticisms, cooperations in the Asian region remain to exist in principle to serve the goals of its members. So the most prominent and enduring organization that emerged in Asian region were APEC or Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, EAS or East Asian Summit, APC, Asia Pacific Community, EAC, East Asian Community, ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and APT, Asian Plus 3. So that's all about my topic about dynamics of Asian regionalism. Thank you for listening.
Hello everyone, so for this video, I will discuss the introduction about ASEAN. What is ASEAN? So ASEAN, or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, is an intergovernmental organization of 10 Southeast Asian nation countries. These are the Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. So the foreign ministers of Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand, they sat down together in the main hall of Foreign Affairs building in Bangkok, Thailand, and signed a document. By the virtue of that document, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations was born. The 5 ministers who signed the document are Adam Malik of Indonesia, Narciso R. Ramos of the Philippines, Tun Abdul Razak of Malaysia, Isra Haratman of Singapore, and Tanat Koman of Thailand. By the way, you need to take note about these countries' names and dates because these are the most important details. So, moving on, those people, they subsequently be hailed as the founding fathers of probably the most successful intergovernmental organization in the developing world today. And the document that they signed would be known as the ASEAN Declaration. Later on, there are 5 countries who joined ASEAN. These are the Brunei, who joined on January 7, 1984, Vietnam on July 28, 1995, Laos and Myanmar on July 23, 1997, and Cambodia on April 13, 1999, making up what is today the 10 member states of ASEAN. What are the aims and purpose of this association? So the aim and purpose is to accelerate economic growth, social progress, and cultural development in the region. Second, to promote regional peace and stability through abiding respect for justice and the rule of law in the relationship among countries in the region and adherence to the principles of United Nations Charter. Next is ASEAN Charter. ASEAN Charter is a constituent instrument of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It serves as a firm foundation in achieving the ASEAN community by providing legal status and institutional framework for ASEAN. It also codifies ASEAN norms, rules, and values, sets clear targets for ASEAN, and presents accountability and compliance. The ASEAN Charter entered into force on December 15, 2008 at the presence of ASEAN foreign ministers at the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta. Next is ASEAN Summit. ASEAN Summit is the highest policy-making body in ASEAN comprising the head of states or government of ASEAN member states. The summit is held twice annually at a time to be determined by the chair of the ASEAN Summit in consultation with other ASEAN member states. The summit is to be hosted by the ASEAN member state holding the ASEAN chairmanship. The first ASEAN Summit was held in Bali, Indonesia on February 23 to 24, 1976. And last but not the least in this discussion is the ASEAN Coordinating Council. ASEAN Coordinating Council or ACC comprises the ASEAN foreign ministers and meets at least twice a year to prepare the ASEAN Summit. The ACC coordinates the implementations of the mandate of ASEAN leaders and all cross-pillar initiatives of ASEAN. Aside from ASEAN Charter, the ACC is guided by the rules of procedures for the ASEAN Coordinating Council, which was adopted by the 5th meeting of ACC on October 22, 2009 in Cha Am, Hua Hin, Thailand. And that's all for this video. The next reporter will continue this topic.
Good morning, everyone. I am Anejin B. Pontios, and this is my report all about the part 2 of the ASEAN, which is, we all know that, Association of the Southeast Asian Nations. So before I start my report, let us all recall first the last discussion all about. Anyone in the class share their knowledge and understanding to the last topic? Okay, you have a good answer. So that means you're all listening to the previous discussion or to our topic that we'll discuss in this morning. So I start my topic or my discussion with a video presentation all about ASEAN Anthem. So open your ears and understand the lyrics because I will call someone to share their knowledge and understanding about the song. So let's start. I have this question. Was ASEAN a necessary trajectory to take among Southeast Asian nations? So anyone in the class have understand this question and will answer this? Was ASEAN a necessary trajectory to take among Southeast Asian nations? So, trajectory means a curved path, meaning to say ASEAN to the countries that belong to the Southeast Asian nations. Meaning to say ASEAN is the one who connect the countries that belong to the Southeast Asian nation to be united as one. So it is really important to have ASEAN, to have this association to connect all of the countries that belong to the Southeast Asia. So, Sanat Kuman is discussed in the previous discussion. My question is, where Sanat Kuman live? Anyone in the class? Okay, Sanat Kuman live in Thailand. So he said that the ASEAN is a cooperation that will repel new colonial powers from stepping in after old colonizers withdraw. That means by ASEAN, it can protect all of the countries that belong to the Southeast Asian to not colonize again. So by this ASEAN, it cannot repeat the history because there are no colonizers that come because it is all protected to the unity of all countries that belong to the Southeast Asia. He also said that it is strategic to work with neighbors with shared interest and identity than with allies from distant lands like Setu. So, it is really an easy way to help one another in neighboring countries than with allies from so far away land. So, by this, they can have a work together because they are the same identity, meaning to say they are the same that live in the Southeast Asian. And then they have also the same interest to progress their countries. So that means by having a unity of these neighboring countries, they can have a bigger power. So the third, he said that harnessing the strength of all member states will provide an advantage in dealing with bigger powers and potential conflicts. So by having this association, by gathering all of the strength or the unity of all the members of ASEAN, they can have a strong or a bigger advantages in fighting back against their problems or conflicts that comes in their way as one. Most importantly, the cooperation and integration enable achievement of goals which could not be accomplished alone. So there are goals that cannot be accomplished by one country. So they are really need help to neighboring countries or the member of the ASEAN to help one another to finish that problems by the group. What sets ASEAN apart from its Asian counterparts? So, we all know that in this association, it is belong to the Southeast Asian nations. So, in ASEAN, there are 10 members. Namely, Brunei Darussalam became member in January 7, 1984. Cambodia became member in April 30, 1999. Indonesia became member in August 8, 1967. The same with Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. And Myanmar became member in July 23, 1997. The same with Laos, and they became also member in July 23, 1997. Vietnam became member in July 28, 1995. So that's the 10 countries that belong to the ASEAN. So according to is Rajaratnam, a founding fathers of or one of the founding fathers of ASEAN, S. Rajaratnam is living in Singapore. So he said that to compare ASEAN with the so-called little dragons of Asia is to compare unrelated political species. The little dragons are lone wolves hunting separately. They lack collective strength or awareness. With them, it is a case of each wolf for itself. In the case of ASEAN, as integration proceeds, its strength will be the cohesiveness of over 300 million people with far greater resources than any of the lone baby dragons. So the little dragons of Asia he was referring here were the economies of Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and Thailand, which at that time was experiencing fast-paced industrialization and economic growth. Meaning to say, he is comparing the ASEAN to the growing countries. The growing countries are a lone wolf, meaning to say they are going to hunt foods by themselves, not having unity. But with ASEAN, with having millions of people that living in those countries, they can have a greater possibilities of having a progressive or to have developed their countries by having unity, by helping one another to the neighboring countries. So here is the principles of the ASEAN. ASEAN Declaration in 1967. So they are referring the ASEAN Declaration in Bangkok Declaration. The opening section of that declaration provided a situationer of CIS geopolitical and economic affairs at that time. So here are the opening sections of declaration of the ASEAN. First in the list is existence of shared problems and interests. So the ASEAN or the members of the ASEAN will share their problems and interests, meaning to say they are going to share their conflicts to solving it by a group, and interest to be progressive countries, developed countries. So that is the first opening section of the Declaration of the CIS, Geopolitical and Economic Affairs. The second opening section of the declaration is need for unity and cooperation. So the ASEAN is really need unity, meaning to say helping one another in neighboring countries and cooperation. Because without these two, the ASEAN cannot be made. And then the third is shared aspirations and ideals like peace, progress, and prosperity. So they are going to share their dreams to have freedom, to be developed countries, and many more. And then shared responsibility for economic and social responsibility. Meaning to say they are going to be responsible. All of the countries that belong, that member in ASEAN will be responsible for their economic and social responsibility. Meaning to say they are the one who will have the task to see what is their economics nowadays and what is the situation in their social life. And then last is the presence of foreign bases as temporary and with concurrence from countries concerned. The following sections containing the declarations in Asia, no? So the first is to establish ASEAN. Second, an articulation of the aims and purpose of the ASEAN. So what are the purpose of the ASEAN? Third, a list of strategies and mechanisms to enable the achievement of the goals. Fourth, the statement of openness for membership. And last, an articulation of ASEAN as a collective representation of member states. So that's all for my report or to my topic. I hope you learned something. Thank you for listening.
Good day everyone, I am Rian Amarelie and I'm going to present or to discuss to you the Association of Southeast Asian Nations or the Asian history. Southeast Asia is composed of 11 countries of impressive diversity in religion, culture, and history. These countries are Brunei, Burma Myanmar, Cambodia, Timor-Leste, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. ASEAN was established on August 8, 1967. The foreign ministers met the Thai Department of Foreign Affairs building in Bangkok, Thailand, and signed the ASEAN Declaration, and more commonly known as the Bangkok Declaration. So it contains the founding principles, aims and goals, and general mechanisms. November 27, 1971, the Zone of Peace, Freedom and Neutrality was held at Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. It contains the declaration articulation of intention to ensure freedom from any external interface and to widen platform for cooperation. On February 24, 1976, the Declaration of Asian Concord was held at Bali, Indonesia. It contains the adoption of a program of action for Asian cooperation, emphasis on the elimination of poverty and related social ills, as well as the intensification of member state support in times of natural calamities. Also, on February 24, 1976, the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia was also held in Bali, Indonesia. It contains a peace treaty to ensure peaceful conflict resolution, non-interference, non-violence, and mutual respect and cooperation. On December 15, 1987, the foreign ministers reaffirmed commitment to previous declaration and record. It is the Manila Declaration that held at Manila, Philippines. And on July 22, 1992, the Asian Declaration on the South China Sea was held at Manila, Philippines. The foreign minister's calls for a peaceful approach in solving issues on the South China Sea, with reference to the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia of 1976 and for exploration on possible cooperation in ensuring safety in the area. On December 15, 1995, the meeting was held at Bangkok, Thailand, the Treaty on the Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapon Free Zone, the Bangkok Treaty. The foreign ministers called for a moratorium on availment, development, and use of nuclear weapons in the sea and provides a set of protocols for monitoring compliance. On December 15, 1997, the foreign ministers had conducted a Asian Vision 2020 held at Kuala Lumpur. It contains the reaffirmation of commitment to Bangkok Declaration on 1967 and re-articulation of the aspirations of the Kuala Lumpur Declaration on 1971, a call for partnership in dynamics development and forging a community of caring societies. On November 5, 2001, the Declaration on Joint Action to Counter Terrorism was held at Bandar Seri Begawan. It contains the condemnation of terrorist attack, expression of sympathy to families and victims of terrorism, rejection of linking terrorism to religion or race, and commitment to counter any terrorist acts. And on October 7 and October 8, 2003, the Declaration of Asian Concord II from Bali Concord was held at Bali. It contains the establishing an Asian community with the pillars: the political and security cooperation, economic cooperation, and socio-cultural cooperation. On January 13, 2007, the Foreign Ministers' meeting was held at Cebu City, Philippines. The Asian Convention on Counterterrorism, or the ECCT. It contains the recalls the Declaration on Joint Action to Counter Terrorism on 2001, defines criminal acts of terrorism based on existing policy instruments. On November 20, 2007, the Declaration of the Asian Economic Blueprint was held at Singapore. It contains the adoption of the Asian Economic Blueprint, and on November 22, 2015, the Asian Socio-Cultural Blueprint 2015 was held at Kuala Lumpur, and on November 22, 2015, Joint Declaration of the Asian Defense Ministers on Promoting Defense Cooperation for a Dynamic Asian Community was held at Vientiane. It contains the commitment to the Asian motto, one vision, one identity, and one caring and sharing community. The foreign ministers established ASEAN with the purpose of accelerating the economic growth, social progress, and cultural development in the region, and promoting regional peace and stability.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Benji Manto Jr., and I will discuss the Asian integration. Okay, let's go. Asian integration has become a buzzword in recent years, propelling conversations among experts on various disciplines and perhaps eliciting questions among the general public. What is integration? In simpler terms, we can look at integration as a pathway toward unification in various spheres in political, economic, and social. The establishment of formal processes towards collaboration for shared economic and socio-cultural goals. Some theories suggest that integration is made possible by certain conditions such as increased level of social interaction and shared ideological patterns amidst a diverse society experiencing fast-paced economic growth. In the case of ASEAN, we can arguably trace back integration to establishment in the 1960s, although more formally in the conceptualization of the ASEAN Vision 2020 in 1977. In these meetings, leaders reaffirmed their commitment to Bangkok Declaration and re-articulated the aspiration of the Kuala Lumpur Declaration. It is also where they called for a more consolidated effort to forge an Asian community. A milestone in the journey towards Asian integration was the development and adoption of the Asian Economic Blueprint to advance the vision of Asian Economic Community.
Single market and production includes free flows of goods, service, investment, capital, and skilled labor, prioritizing food, agriculture, and forestry and integration sector. Competitive economic region includes introduction of fair competition policy, consumer protection, intellectual property rights, infrastructures development, taxation, and e-commerce. Equitable economic outcomes includes developing small and medium enterprises, initiative for Asian integration. Integration into the global economy includes maintaining Asian centrality, participation in the global supply network. There have been various opinions before the ASA was launched. Some thought that this will result in higher competition within the labor market and will pose some challenge ensuring the labor force is ready for this competition. Others believe there is a need to ensure the local products are of high quality, as this will compete not only with local counterparts but also counterparts from nearby sea nation. And that's all. Thank you for listening.